Mr. Hawes, I was just in sort of following that up. Of course, the UK has far more than its fair share, if you like, of Formula One development companies. And they are both, I think, very good for stimulating innovation in our automotive industry, and also they're great PR for the UK as an advanced manufacturing country. Do you think this will affect, that Brexit will affect their decision, because many of them, of course, are not UK owned, to stay here, or do you think we'll see them moving to Germany and other places?
I can't speak with too much authority on that sector. That's not something we're responsible to, but my view on it is obviously that's a global industry, and the undoubted success that the UK has in that field, 7 out of the 8 out of the 11 teams being based here, is something that we want to ensure that continues. They will scour the world globally for the best engineering talent, and clearly they will be very desirable places to go and work if you are one of the top engineers. So I think they will be concerned about the ability to continue to recruit that top talent with whatever the future is, be that from Europe or elsewhere. But as I said, it's a hugely successful industry, globally successful, and it's one that we need to, again, continue to help see grow, because what you're alluding to is some of the transition between the technological development that comes from Formula One and goes into production vehicles, and the reverse is equally true. So it's important that both are seen facing similar issues.
What do you think that tariffs imposed in UK-EU trade would do to the industry? I appreciate there's going to be some speculation about the character of the agreements that finally get struck. And what would be the impact if import tariffs on components were abolished by the UK? And there may be one or two supplementary matters to come to.
Thank you.
Okay, you're right. The average UK-built car has about 41% UK components. In other words, 59–60% come from abroad. The majority come from the EU. So we are part of the single market, which we appreciate. So currently there are no tariffs on parts or indeed the vehicles. And that is very, very important for the industry, because the nature of the industry, as you develop a model, parts will be developed in one country, they will cross a border into another to end up in a sub-assembly, then they might end up in an engine made in a third country, and then assembled in a finished vehicle in a fourth country. And to a certain extent, that will happen between the UK and the rest of Europe for certain components. So any tariff is going to add cost. We are, I would hope people recognise, an incredibly lean and efficient industry, constantly striving to reduce cost. The margins that the industry operates on are wafer thin. I think it's like a common, if you want a rule of thumb, in terms of return on investment, is around 4%. So any tariff immediately is going to be a critical challenge to a company, especially when their competitors may not be subject to those tariffs.
You've answered my question on non-tariff barriers, but could I just ask you about procurement regulations and the extent to which they are of concern in a post-Brexit world? And I know they've been of some concern previously, but how do you see that developing?
Obviously, being part of the single market, any procurement contract has to be open to all member states, and so UK manufacturers have the opportunity to tender for any large public procurement contracts wherever they are in Europe. It has always been an issue of some debate, because invariably any public procurement, any government wants to balance the impact on public purse with also an understandable, perhaps intent desire to try and support local industry jobs and so forth. If we are not going to be eligible to apply for those contracts, UK manufacturers clearly would be at a disadvantage.
Thank you.
Could I just ask, as a supplementary, would you regard it as a legitimate negotiating tactic for us to say that if the right is withdrawn from UK firms, that we should take a similar step in restricting our public procurement?
I think we would always advocate free trade and the maximum opportunity for UK manufacturers to compete globally. I don't think that will be one of the most important issues. Certainly our principle will be to try to maximise the global opportunities for UK companies.
Thank you, Mr. Hawes. Alice Brown. Thank you, Lord Chairman. Can I bring you on to the significance of standards? I mean, clearly EU standards and being part of setting EU standards for things like fuel consumption, CO2 emissions, other emissions is important. I think if I could also throw in whole vehicle type approval and also international technical harmonisation as to, will it be essential for us to stay in line with all of these things post-Brexit, or would there be advantages for us to come out of some of those things? Could you kind of explore that for us a bit?
As I said, we operate in at least a European, if not a global, industry. Ideally, we would like global technical standards, and to a certain extent, there is a move towards that. It's glacial pace, but there are a number of areas where there are global technical regulations. The UK, they start in the UNECE, and the UK is and will remain part of that process, which sets the direction. Invariably, when you are looking at different standards, but you are looking at additional cost. So you develop a car for Europe. The beauty is you produce it to a single standard, and then you can sell that car across a market of 550 million. If the UK was to come outside of that, then and set its own standards, that will obviously be additional cost, and you would also then have to look at the effect on the consumer. Would a manufacturer who currently makes a lot of a huge range of cars, but there's about 350 models on the market, so the consumer's got a massive amount of choice because there is that economies of scale. You can make a particular car for a particular niche for a particular thing. If the UK was to set its own standards, then manufacturers will say, well, I can't make that, the sums add up to ensure, to give you that range of vehicles to a UK standard. The issues you raise about CO2, around air quality, and I'll come to type approval, again, these are very, very challenging issues. The UK is part of the European regulation, which is trying to both set a lower, as you personally be well aware, reduction in CO2, and also address the air quality issue. Those new regulations which come in next year will apply to UK manufacturing, products you manufacture in UK, and we would expect and indeed want them to continue post whenever we leave the EU. Turning to type approval, again, one of the real advantages of having a type approval authority in the UK is that it helps with the R&D, and the R&D helps with the production, and you can then get it type approved for anywhere in Europe. A concern we have, an immediate concern, is that the type approval authority in the UK is the Vehicle Certification Agency. It can authorise for a number of different standards, but certainly it can certify for whole vehicle type approval. The concern we have is as to the validity of a type approval certificate issued by the VCA post 2019 or whenever we leave Europe. Will it still be in force or not? We don't have a clear legal opinion, and so that means manufacturers may immediately be forced to look to type approve their vehicles with a different agency, a German one, a French one, there's a number out there, to ensure that the vehicle remains certified for the life of the vehicle, which could well be beyond 2019.